Awesome. Thanks, Josh. All right, so teaching Ruby for fun and profit. Yay for nice cliche talk names. So I Googled teaching for fun and profit, and that's what came up. So I put it on a slide because I thought it was funny. But yeah, it doesn't really tell you what I'm going to talk about. So we're going to go on a little journey today and think about what it's like for new people coming into our community. Who wants to join us? How do we teach them? How do we bring them in? What are some of the challenges that they face? So I'm Renée Voursney. As Josh just said, I run a consulting company in Seattle in the States. And I've been teaching now for, this is my 3rd year teaching. I do Rails Bridge workshops. I've been working with them for 3 years. And I do also paid for classes. So I've been teaching a lot. And this is, I don't know, could be a bit about what it's like for my students. So there was a New York Times article that inspired this talk a bit. There's been some, I don't know, a lot of things that inspired this talk. But there was a New York Times article about last year this time about learning the language of the internet. And about we're in a really interesting sector of the kind of global economy. It's hot. Like everybody wants a Ruby on Rails developer. There's tons of jobs in our industry. It's popular, it's cool, and we work on the internet. Like that's fun. And so I noticed in that article I just highlighted, they were talking about all these schools coming up to teach people how to code, how to learn the language of the internet, right? So I highlighted the ones having something to do with Ruby, Ruby or Rails. There's a lot out there. There's tons of courses, little, code academies popping up all over the place, different people teaching. It's interesting because there's still this demand for jobs. It's hard to find a good Ruby developer to hire these days. And why is that with all these classes? Like that's interesting. So here's another article listing off, there was 27 different online universities and courses that you could find online. And about 15 or 17 of them had something to do with Ruby on Rails. Well, that's really interesting. There's lots of resources out there. Huh. Everybody wants to be a Rubyist. Man. And what we do is really fun. Like we're here at a conference and enjoying each other's company, and I'm traveling all over the world these days, having lots of fun. And it's interesting. I was talking to some students actually about, in industry, it's rare that your friends are also the people you work with. But we're Rubyists. Like we go out and drink together. It's a really interesting, fun community to be a part of. And you talk to other people in different industries, and like, man, what you do is so fun. I wish I could do that. Like my job sucks. Well. And we have this awesome community of people. So I kind of stole this from Konstantin. He had a talk at Ruby Fusa and mentioned that Matt's actually called himself a dictator about what he's going to allow into like the standard library. He's still our dictator. Well, that applies to the community as well. We have this Matt's is nice and so we are nice. And those playing the Ruby buzzword bingo game, Minaswan, there you go. So, he wrote a language for people. He's a nice guy. We have this, ideal in our community of all about the people. That's pretty cool. So, we've got this great community, all these courses online, booming economy, lots of jobs. Why isn't there like 600 people at this conference? Why are there still jobs available? Well, there must be something that's hard about Ruby. Something hard for new people to come into our community. So we're going to take a little detour here for a minute. And I'll start off with this section is like a new person's payback to certain conference slides. So does anybody know what these equations are? Just
Ross was changing mass, the rocket equation.
The rocket equation, sure. Well, so that's awesome that someone actually knew that. So we, I was not expecting anyone to know that. That's great. Can you explain it to us, Konstantin? You want to come up here?
So the thing is that you have the normal equation for thrust, where you have mass times acceleration or something. And that doesn't work for rockets because you're actually constantly losing mass because you're burning the fuel and the dropping the tank. And you actually need that because otherwise it would be inefficient to reach the first or second cosmic velocity or something.
So did you like look this up because you knew it was in the talk?
No, I was actually giving a presentation in high school about this.
That's awesome. Well, so we've just kind of derailed the next section of the talk. Thanks, Constantine. Especially since this section is kind of payback for all the code slides that you've had. But so Adam, I'm going to call up here on stage here. So Adam, come on up. So Adam here actually has a degree in rocket propulsion, unlike Constantine. And he's also my fiance, so I get to pick on him a bit. He's a new Rubeus trying to learn. But we get to play this little, not only do I get the whole plethora of like rocket scientist light bulb jokes at home, we have this little game we like to call Ask a Rocket Scientist. So when I don't know something, and I know nothing about these equations, I ask a rocket scientist. So could you explain these to us? Maybe correct Constantine if he was wrong.
Okay, Constantine, very, very close. That rocket equation, most important thing about all of rocket science, this is delta V, how much you're changing the velocity of your vehicle as you expel mass out the back. So that little v is how fast you're expelling the mass. So why does this matter? See that natural log? If you remember from high school algebra, you want that number needs to be a positive. Otherwise, a negative delta v would mean your rocket sort of implodes into the pad. And that's a very bad thing. Fireballs, death, and destruction. We don't want that. Where does this come from? It's these two second equations here, which Constantine, that's where you did the right thing. Your mass is changing as you're expelling exhaust. If you remember Newton's second law, force equals mass times acceleration. You have a certain amount of force that your rocket is pushing with, your mass is changing, so your acceleration is increasing. And so you need to integrate across that. You know, I'm seeing some blank looks. You should thank Renee for not giving you the differential equations for this.
Awesome. So what you're trying to say then, Adam, is this.
Yeah, basically you need a huge rocket to put a little tiny hut on the moon.
Cool. So to make it even simpler, right? So if that equation was a little simpler, we'd be having RubyConf Mars on the bridge of the Enterprise right now. And if that equation was a little harder, we'd still be trying to figure out Sputnik. But that equation basically let us get on the moon, right?
Just barely.
Cool. Adam, could you explain this to me?
So it's an array that you're doing something to?
Awesome, yeah. Adam, can you explain this to me?
Yeah, okay. It's kind of like a counter type thing. Like for this array, you kind of loop through it and you add to the counter, and then at the end, I guess it's all the values of the array added together.
Cool, yeah, thank you. You can sit down now. Yes, thanks, Adam. Awesome. And you know this picture here, right? I've got this collection of crayons. They're in boxes. If I, said to a 5-year-old, go grab all the crayons in the first box, put them in another box, do that in order, and then count up how many crayons you have, I could get the total number of crayons in my box, right? Anybody could do that. Sure. It's a real life example of where I might want to know how many crayons I have. Sure. This is kind of a model of that. All right, I'm counting up. It's pretty explicit. Adam mentioned it's a loop. I know it's not a loop. I know we're passing a block to an each method. But it's a simplification. You could explain to somebody this is a loop. And you could say, OK, to simplify this even more, I'm just saying, take this operation, apply it to everything in a collection, give me the result. Awesome. I haven't really explained inject to you, but I've given you enough to use it. You could probably, from what I've said, figure out, well, this might apply to multiply too. Sure. Yeah, continue with that. So you don't need a degree in rocket science to understand inject. But a degree in rocket science doesn't actually help you understand inject. You still need somebody that knows how to use it, somebody in the industry or whatever that's done it before to break it down for you, to simplify. Come up with an example. Awesome. Is there some kind of analogy, some real world? What the heck's going on here? What's the context? You know, throwing inject up on a slide, which if you're playing the conference drinking game, right, every time you see inject, you got to finish your drink. That's yeah, so we simplify. Give you enough, depending on your level, to kind of understand what's going on. But there's a lot more going on here. For whatever level you are of Ruby, you could think about, you know, this problem. How do you explain to your audience, whoever your audience is, you know, what level are they at? Where do you break it down? What are the other questions that you could answer? There's a lot here. You could think about, well, how's inject implemented on the back end? How's it really working? Is there C code I could go look at? Do I know C code? Maybe. Is it different in the different implementations of Ruby? Does Rubeus do this differently? Constantine could probably answer that one too. Which is faster? When should I use this? And which is faster being, you know, should I use the each method or should I, you know, use inject? Is there some kind of optimization here? There's lots of questions. There's lots going on. Depending on where you start, what your level is, the conversation is different. But that context needs to be there. All right, so that's, you know, the Ruby language itself. But if I answered, why is learning Ruby so hard? Well, yeah, there's some context there. But, you know, Ruby has a lot of moving parts. What do I mean by that? There's a lot going on when we say you're going to be a new Ruby developer. Come, join our community, be a Ruby developer. So to learn Ruby, in comparison to, say, Java or C#, there's more stuff to kind of take in. I could, you know, say, go learn Java. All right, so you go to the Sun website. There's a whole bunch of documentation. Maybe you download Eclipse. It brings down the JVM. You start playing around in this kind of IDE. It's a one-click installer. You can pretty much start hacking on Java right away. You can figure it out. Jump into the language. There's not too much else there. You know, to be a full Java developer, yeah, there's more. Same kind of thing for maybe C# or VB. You go to Microsoft website. There's kind of this one place to go and look. Lots of resources. One-click installer. Sure, boom, you're going. Okay. Interesting thing about us. So I usually, when there's Wi-Fi, I look out and there's a sea of Macs. You know, and you're talking at a Ruby conference. Most of us use Macs or some kind of Unix-based. To be a Ruby developer, you know, we work on Mac, sure, some kind of Unix environment. Well, you know what? Until very recently, what the easiest operating system was to get started on Ruby or Ruby on Rails? Windows. I've been doing, I said, Railsbridge workshops for the last 3 years. I've always used the Rails installer. One-click installer on Windows. Takes 5 minutes, boom, it works. Just done. And you know what? The crazy like compile errors that you get when something is off and you got a 3 Rubeus look at the screen kind of going like, oh, I don't know. You know what fixes that on Windows? Rerunning the installer. I'm serious, like rerun the installer, boom, it just works. Like way easier than our standard in the industry, right? We all use Macs. You actually want to be a Ruby developer, you probably buy a Mac. That's really interesting. So what else is there? It's kind of strange pieces. All right, so I want to be a Ruby developer. Well, you got to learn Git. Oh, source control. Every developer in the world uses source control. We use Git here as the industry standard. It's amazing. Oh, it's so much better than like SVN. You ever try and do like branching and merging with SVN? Branching, sure. Merging, right? Like, oh, it's great. You got to learn Git. Git's amazing. Well, oh, and all of our stuff is up on GitHub, and it works with Git. And wait. So, OK. Git, I'm at the command line, I've got this log, I'm keeping track of my changes. Like, that makes sense. But then GitHub's this like website, and there's like forking and code all over the place, and all these people there. What is that? Why are they, what's different here? What's going on? Like, what's Git versus GitHub? Well, I don't know. I mean, that's kind of confusing. Sure. You got to know both. You'll figure it out. Sure. Just work with Git, and GitHub will come later. You don't need that just yet. Oh, Ruby Version Manager. Oh, Ruby Version Manager is amazing. Remember when you used to have to compile Ruby from source? Oh God, yeah, right. It makes your life so much easier, and there's gem sets. Gem sets are awesome. Like you can switch between projects, different versions of gems. Yeah, like you don't have to worry about that just yet. But like Ruby Version Manager, get it set up, get it work on your machine. There's some command line tool, but we'll just like set your default to 193, and you can just roll. There you go. But RVM, okay, great. Oh, and you need like a text editor, and oh, have you ever used the command line? IRB, yeah, like that might not be what we think it means. There's a lot of stuff that we kind of take for granted. We forget about. Like, this is new. You could actually be a developer that's been working as in another language for like 15 years and never touched the command line. Like, that's possible. That's reasonable for other languages, other communities. So command line might be new. This new text that Sublime's awesome. It's got all these packages. You can like customize it. You can make it look just like your terminal and have all these keep commands. Or Vim, you should learn Vim. Vim's great. There's like Vim Rails. You can work with Rails and all these cool plugins for it. Or Emacs. I mean, Mats uses Emacs. If you want to be a Ruby developer, you should learn Emacs. And you can learn that at the same time you're learning Ruby. Why not? You need to be with the community. You gotta have that commonality with us, right? IRB, yeah, just fire up a Ruby interpreter, start typing Ruby at it. That's cool. What's the difference between that and the command line? But I've never used a command line before. Why doesn't CD work in IRB? Oh, well, it does if you install pry, like cool things. There's a lot of new stuff. A lot of new stuff going on that you have to learn. That's just like right there out of the box. Oh, and testing, yeah, like you shouldn't do any Ruby code unless you learn testing. You've done testing before, right? Of course you should test your code. Automated testing, that's like not a new concept. Doing that for a long time. Oh, and Ruby gems, that's the power of Ruby. Everything's already done for you. You can just find a gem for that, whatever you want to do. Yeah, but you've worked with a package manager before, right? Like, that's simple, you know how to do that. Oh, sure, and Cucumber, outside-in behavior-driven development, yeah, sure. Like that's great. It's like your insurance policy with your clients when you're writing code. Wait, okay, so I've got like test over here and some Ruby code over here, but this is Ruby code 2, and it's a Ruby gem. But there's like RSpec, which is a Ruby gem, but like Minitest kind of comes with Ruby, and why do we use one over the other? And Agile, right? Like you didn't learn waterfall or anything. You haven't been doing like requirements or anything like documents or anything like that. Oh, Agile, that's what we do here. You got to learn that. Okay, cool, yeah. So I'm ready to go. Whew. So what do I use? Oh, there's this awesome site. The Ruby Toolbox, everything's there. Every gem in the world that you need to go figure out what you need to do. I'm sure somebody's done this. There's something that's gonna make your life easier, and you can compare them, all the gems. You can find out what the most popular thing is, like the industry standard, and you can links to the code over here. You can link to the Travis. You can see if it's working for your environment. There's some documentation there. Yeah, oh, okay, cool. So I found a gem I want to use. It looks like it's really popular on Ruby Toolbox, so I'll use that. Okay, sounds good. So documentation. We're an interesting industry when I say that there's documentation, right? I'm talking about like a bunch of blog posts somewhere maybe, or a README, or maybe there's a website, but the website name and the gem name don't exactly match, and I don't know. Well, some of them, there's a list on Ruby Toolbox. You can click on that, or just go to the GitHub page. There's usually a README, and you can look at the code. Like the code, it's like self-documenting. Everybody can read Ruby code. It's meant to be readable. You can just go in, look at the code. You can do that, figure it out. It's awesome. Or you can scroll down to the README and see the getting started guide. Awesome. Yeah. Well, anybody, there's a lot of assumptions that we make about understanding what's going on in a README. This is an excerpt from a gem you usually use with Rails, and it's a Ruby gem, but it's actually for JavaScript templating. Wait, so it's written in Ruby code, but it actually has nothing to do with JavaScript? Oh, that's confusing. Why would I use, oh dear. And where does this get installed? Well, this is supposed to go with a Rails app, but it doesn't actually say? Use this with a Rails app. These are files in your Rails application. Oh, you must be using Bundler. Everybody uses Bundler. Yeah, so works like that. Okay, all right, now I've gotten how to use it. Cool. Let me try using some gems here. So I installed Rails. Let me fire up a Rails app here. Oh, I thought I installed Rails. Shucks. Well, good. It's telling me what to do. I'll just do that. Good. All right. Awesome. Oh, and I'm using Z Shell. Z Shell is great. It saves you so much time. You can see your Git repository right there. Awesome. Yeah, like you can program the whole command line to do everything right there, and it's fun. It's great. It saves you so much time. So yeah, that didn't work. I followed the instructions. I sudo gem installed Rails. For those following along, I now have a whole bunch of stuff in my RVM directory owned by root. That's not going to screw up anything down the line now. No, we're good. It's cool. All right, so it's not quite working the way I expect. I don't know what to do. Well, I'll Google the error. That seems to be what people tend to do here. All right, so Google the error. Stack Overflow. What did we do before Stack Overflow? Rubeus loves Stack Overflow. There's lots of stuff going on up there. Cool. Okay, so, and yeah, so this kind of looks like my problem, right? All right, well, they may be on Unix. Maybe I know that. Maybe I know that they're on Unix and I'm on a Mac. Maybe. I don't know. But it looks like the same problem. I sudo gem installed Rails, and Rails doesn't actually seem to be working. Well, that kind of matches my problem. Maybe this is what's going on for me. And I gotta say, I Googled to find like a not helpful Stack Overflow error. It was the very first, I Googled the error, this is the very first thing I found. So notice, all right, it's not working, right? Rails, I type in Rails, it does not know that command. The first answer, the most popular answer on this, Stack Overflow, it works. It's working. Don't worry about it. No, it's working. It worked. You're fine. Really not working. It's working. Thank you so much. That's great. This is really helpful to me. Yeah. Okay, so I'm kind of lost. I don't know where to go. And then, yeah, stuff like this happens. Life comes in, right? My boss needs a new TPS report. My dog really needs a walk. You know, my kid's lost his binky and is crying. And I've got all this new stuff to learn. No real good help. I don't know where I am. I'm kind of lost. Okay, I'm gonna go back and fix some of this stuff. Maybe I'll pick up Ruby later. Maybe when I really get sick of it. And you know, it's really hard to be bad at something. Like, we're all adults at this point. I'm talking about teaching adults. You know, maybe I'm really good at those TPS reports. I hate it. It's a life-sucking job. But maybe I'm awesome. I'm the best TPS report writer in the whole world. I've been doing something for the last 20 years. You know, I've probably become pretty good at something. Now I got to start at ground zero, and all this new stuff. That's pretty hard. And that's like, this is kind of the best path, right? We've got stuff set up. It's kind of working. I've got, you know, some inclination of where to look and how to go there. You know, imagine if I come in with like other baggage going on. You know, I'm really good at TPS reports, and everybody seems to think Ruby's easy, and anybody can pick it up and learn it. And man, this is hard for me. Am I, you know, the one koala in 1,000 that's special? I wonder. I had to fit drop bears in there somewhere. I'm in Australia. So my point here is there's a lot we take for granted to be part of this community, to be here. We want to be nice. We want to remember that not everybody has that same context. You know, what does it mean? Can we break it down? Is there some simplifying assumption that we forgot to tell everybody when they walked in the door? So even on Twitter, especially on Twitter or like online, imagine reaching out on Stack Overflow. You don't even know what extra information to give. Like, yeah, as an expert, you go in there like, well, it's probably this, but I need your environment information or something else. And the new person doesn't even know what question to ask. That's hard, reaching out across the internet to someone you don't even know. Well, especially if you see somebody, right, in your community that's kind of new, help them out. Give them some of that context. We have to remember this. To grow our community, to bring new people in, to teach them our ways. Like, we want our community to grow. We want to bring that in. But we forget our roots sometimes. We forget that context, right? It's not rocket science that we do. But there's a lot that we've learned, that we've acquired, this common skill set. It is hard to switch industries, to come into that new. So let's not forget our roots. Let's remember this as we bring other people in. That not everybody has the same context that we do. That it's challenging. And with that, that's about it. It's just before lunchtime, so I'd love to talk to you more about this. If you have questions for me or want to chat about teaching Ruby, teaching Rails, teaching in general, and how we do that, come find me at lunch and we'll chat. It'll be great. Thank you.